Hey, good morning or afternoon to everyone who's tuning in. This is Leilani Evans with TAG. We are offering these webinars to our Sage clients to offer them a little bit of enhanced knowledge on some of the products and tools that are available for your Sage 100 contractor or Sage 300 CRE construction accounting system. For anyone who is new to the Zoom webinar platform, everyone is muted. You can send in any questions you might have along the way during this presentation. We're going to have a lot of information. So if you have questions, send them in through the Q&A box or the chat box. I'll be monitoring and I will save those for our presenter until the end of the presentation. This is also being recorded, so it will be sent out to you all, as well as available on our YouTube channel so that you could share it with the rest of your team members. With that, I will go ahead and hand it off to our presenter. Today's topic is Sage Office Connector, and we have James Coyle from Event One Software, who is going to lead us through this presentation. Go ahead, James.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks to everyone who's attending here. We just have a few slides to talk about the Sage Office Connector product suite, and I'll go through those just to introduce the higher level content. Then we'll be demonstrating the technology and providing you a good overview of each piece and part, and then we'll come back to the presentation to kind of summarize, wrap up, and questions. What we're going to do today is an overview of the entire product suite, and there are quite a few products, and there's many ways that they are utilized by your peers, and so we're going to plant seeds and try to inspire and educate you as to how other people are utilizing the technology. But people learn at their own paces and whatever. So there is a means through TAG and through Sage to get, if you don't already own it, like evaluation opportunities to play around with the technology, or get a presentation that dives into more detail on specific, mission critical topics that you want to know more about, like, distributed project cost forecasting integrated with work in progress and cash flow. That's like a real hot topic these days with everything going on. So, but this will provide a good foundation for everything else. So that's our goal, that's our objective. As Leilani identified, if you have a question and you chat it, she can, make me aware of it, and I can stop and address it, and it won't interrupt my presentation. I've done this quite a lot. So, so just the high level overview, the product penetration. This is Sage Office Connector is a Sage technology. It's white label. It's a Sage product line, and it was created by Event One Software. Sage sells and markets it. So we stand behind it and have other Excel-based technology that works with other Sage ERPs and what have you that could be complementary. So if that comes up for you, like you have data in other databases that you would also like to see reporting on, or maybe family together with your Sage 300 construction real estate data, then bring that topic up with your TAG representatives, and then we can guide you to the best way to understand how this can be familied with other data, perhaps from Sage Estimating or from Procore or whatever other product lines or products that you have, like paperless or what have you. So there's over 3,000 companies out there that utilize this technology. That's over 10,000 concurrent uses, because that's how the product primarily is sold, is by concurrency, and these are shared. So it's hard to determine how many people would really be utilizing this technology, but it would be quite large, much larger than that number. And our belief is that the reason people tend to gravitate to it, especially once they understand what it is because of how easy it is to set up, learn, and use technology that is Excel-based. So this is not pushing data into Excel that's static. It's just a better way to push static information, the kind of thing that people were doing when I first started in the 80s, right, or early 90s. This is something completely different. we're building what we want in Excel. It's connected to Sage, so you don't ever have to do this pushing. The data can be as current as you want it to be, and it can be laid out and with graphs and charts and things like that all connected to it. So what you could accomplish is quite extraordinary. And our objective is to help you see how easy that is to do, and also to beyond just reporting and analytics, because clearly people use this for business intelligence and analytics. There's another aspect, which is database management. This is Sage technology, and it respects, of course, and honors Sage's security, but our objective is to streamline how you work so you don't handle information more than once. If you remove the human factor, you can remove errors and elements of security. So we'll touch upon that as part of this presentation. And our objective is to save you time. That's the return on investment. And people will report a pretty extraordinarily quick return on investment with the technology, fast enough that you would probably believe me. But there will be people who say that it paid for itself within a week, certainly within a month of using it. But it just really depends on how you use the technology. Some people use it in a minimal sense, and it's going to take a lot longer to get payback. But if you look at the opportunity we're about to show you, I think you'll recognize how transformative it can be. So this first visual helps you understand the technology from the context of an Excel workbook. So you see one hanging out back there. It's already formatted. You might recognize it's an interactive workbook for cost forecasting. So I want data in the hands of operational people. Maybe they're in the field, wherever, and I want it to be current, and I want to capture information like cost to complete or units in place or whatever it is that's happening out there. And then periodically that data changes, and I don't want to have to go through a bunch of steps. So the technology that would draw the data into Excel, connect Excel to Sage from inside of Excel, that's query. The query product line does that. So that's the reporting and analytics aspect. When you get data, for example, data like that, cost to complete, percent complete, why would you then manually enter it into Sage? I mean, people have been doing that a lot of years ago, back in the 90s. It's not necessary. You can just hit a button and bam, it goes into Sage and it's accurate, eliminates your duplication of entry. So there's the capability of writing data into Sage or importing. And you control who can do this or whether you even want it to happen. Sage's security is tight. You can't just write to like a job-to-date cost. Sage wouldn't allow that. But you could import detail that could add to it, or you could manually enter it. But I think most people want to think about what they're doing that's time, takes up a lot of time, and streamline that, and import and write can easily facilitate that. So those are the three products, and I'll demonstrate how they work and some use cases for them within this. But it could hopefully inspires you to other things you want to accomplish in your business. And it'll, can I use it for this or this or this? And when we get those questions, then we know you're getting it. You realize what this potential is. Now, a part of querying is, of course, reporting. But there's an aspect of reporting that's special, and that's financial reporting. And financial reporting isn't just show me what's in my database, like in this area of the database, the job-to-date cost or the total estimate or whatever. It's derivative, meaning I want to see my current balance and my current activity or my year-to-date activity through this point in time. And next to it, I want 3 years ago. Well, that's not stored in one place in Sage. You can't just, there's no way to just look that up. You can derive that information. And if you did it without what I'm about to show you, it could be quite tedious and labor intensive. But Office Center Financials allows that specialized reporting to happen and happen easily. So we'll demonstrate that so you get an idea. So that extends the capability. There's legacy financials, you have it, but to extend it, to understand what the full power of Sage's product line is, financials really is pretty extraordinary, and you'll see that here today. Okay, so the same products we just talked about, you're seeing them now listed here, but now we're talking about how they're licensed, how Sage would sell them and what have you. Just so most of it's licensed just like all the other Sage applications, you know, uses of accounts payable, uses of job costs. Well, these are uses of query designer or standard or write or what have you. And they're concurrency based. When someone's using it, they're using it. If they save their workbook and they're just working now with that data they refreshed, then they release their concurrency. And we can talk more about when a concurrency is being used and how it's released. But we first want you to understand that the majority is concurrency based. Now, when it comes to financials, that's not, if you get it, you get it and you have it. So the query has capability, all this capability I'm going to demonstrate. But when I demonstrate financials, you're going to see that there's a lot more going on to derive values for one or more prefixes and for whatever period you want to report on, right, side by side and what have you. And so to have the financial capability, you just pay for it once, and it extends the capability of your query licenses. Now, rest assured, as I've already said, that you can control who has access to information in Excel, right? There's Sage Security. Your TAE consultant can guide you through that, you can set up that through ODBC, Open Database Connectivity, you can limit the access to your Sage data from outside, whether you use Microsoft Query or Crystal or Access or Office Connector, you have control over who sees what. And so rest assured that people can't just refresh financials unless you've allowed them to do that. So that's how they're licensed. And import, there are programs in Sage, applications that facilitate importing detail. You can import accounts payable invoices, accounts receivable invoices, job cost estimates, payroll time. And as long as you create a file that's comma separated in exactly the right format, then you can import. And you might be doing that. But in reality, people work with data differently than the format that it has to be in. And so to bridge that gap between how it has to be formatted to get into Sage and how you might want to work with it in Excel, the import capabilities handle that. So Designer would allow you to map functions to an existing data. Let's say you have estimate data in Excel workbook and you don't want to manually enter it. Why would you want to keep doing that? That would not be strategically a good idea. But you want to get it into Sage, you could use the Designer to put import functions next to it, and then it will create the properly formatted file and even automate that import for you. So there's a lot that can happen there. Sometimes though people don't want that. I just need to import estimates, or I just want to handle payroll time, and they get the respective feature. So I'll talk to you a bit about the features and what that is. We'll touch on that. But as I said earlier, we have presentations that will go into much more detail specifically on write and import. So as you want to learn more about the capabilities, we can give you that anytime available content, and you can build on what you're seeing and hearing here. So when we show this technology, typically it starts with this query designer. I want to build something. And I've been affiliated with this technology for 35 years. So I've taught programmers, I've taught consultants and end users how to get data out of all sorts of different technologies that are Sage centric. And this is another way of doing that. And so I'm going to just show you how you can involve something. But this was designed to work intuitively the way most people we found think, as opposed to you going to a class where I'm teaching you how to think about Crystal or whatever else it is that I'm trying to teach you. So you'll see that here, and you can decide for yourself if that's intuitive or not. So that's what I'm going to start with. Then I'll segue into showing you financials, introducing that to you, and then we'll touch upon the write and import, and then we'll return to the power point here. Are there any questions at this point before I dive in?
No questions so far.
Okay, great. The first thing then I want to start with is the Sage Desktop. That's what we all use, right? We all have this, and from it I can either launch an application, like I can come here, and go and open up job costs, and then I'm using job costs, or I can identify specific tasks, or maybe when you use the Sage Desktop, you only see your specific tasks. So I don't know how each person is utilizing Sage, but that's kind of, you should be familiar with that. Well, notice on the bottom is Excel-based reporting. So that's going to be Office Connector, one way of getting access. There are some Excel templates that are just part of Sage. They get installed when you install it. In fact, Office Connector is installed when you install it. But those templates can't be modified. They just are what they are. So we're not, that's not what this is about. This is about all this content that you're going to see on this launchpad. Now, the launchpad is one way to get access to the different reports that either come with the software or you might want to build. And another way is they're just Excel templates or workbooks. You can put them wherever you put Excel templates and workbooks. But another way to use it is to use it just the way you do everything else. So if you come here to reports and job costs, I mean, there's a number of reports, and your menus are probably going to look different than this because you can customize them. But these reports, when you go into Report Manager, you know, and I hit New or I edit, I've got a report name. That's the name on the menu and what group. And then it's the type of report, like Report Designer and Crystal and you know, Office Connector is an option. So I can take my Office Connector workbooks and I can put them on my menus if that's what I want to use. So you can access it that way. And I'm going to do that right off the bat with my first example. I'm just going to come here and say, oh, I want a cost to complete report, right? So it's just like any of these other reports, but when I launch it, it's going to launch an Excel workbook that is a cost to complete report. So right here, it's launching Excel, and there's my workbook. And so now I'm in this workbook and I can use it. Now, how you would use a workbook, you know, each person, it's up to you, but there's ways that we've noticed how people tend to use things. And for forecast workbooks like this, the normal way is that people would generate a workbook for every active project, and they would store those usually in a forecast folder on the network and then subfolders for project managers, but you can put these wherever you want. But when any of the templates that you're going to see on the Launchpad, they'll all have this information page. And so take a moment and read it. If you don't know what a template does, open it up and read, and it will tell you what its purpose is, where the source of the data is. You might look at this and go, oh, I would like to add XYZ to it. Okay, you could do that. If you had a designer, you could do it, or you could work with a consultant. But this is designed right now out of the box to follow this process and produce a result. So if I came here to this admin page, it told me right there to pick to enter in a job. So if I enter in 03001 and enter in a cutoff date, and I've got data that's not your data. I've got data that's sample data. So that's the period. And then the way this was designed, and you can design your reports however you want them. This one was designed this way, and others are designed however, but you just hit this button to refresh. And when I click this button, the cost to complete workbook is filled out for that job as of that cutoff date. And now I'm ready to go. I can give it to someone. I could protect the workbook. So I could ask you, like, if you were going to generate a current workbook for all your projects with a cutoff date right now, and you weren't using this technology, and everybody needs it, and they need it right now, how would you do this right here? And it wouldn't be fast, right? It's a pain. That's why people would tend to get this kind of technology. But with this, totally easy. Here it is. I just generated it, and I could protect it, and now an operational person could, and it depends. You may let them refresh with a standard license, or you may refresh and give it to them, but now they see that what information you want. So a normal question at this point is, well, what if I wanted to add another column to this? Some of the Launchpad reports, you can just add a column. It's totally easy. Others are very sophisticated, and a macro actually builds the layout. So those are not as easy to edit, but they're sophisticated, useful. But if you built something yourself, it's totally easy to add columns. And in this case, it wouldn't be that difficult to add columns. And we cover that sort of thing in training, and a consultant can guide you through how you might approach something. But I could focus in on only certain cost codes, or I could focus in on description, or I could say, hey, I want to break out the division into a separate column and filter on that. I could do that, but I could also just come in here and look at this data, and the operational person will say, okay, well, I know that this is $45,000 to complete. And now see how these other formulas recalculated? That's because they're already set up in advance to work a certain way. And if this is the way you work, great, you're ready to go right now. But it's possible that you like this, but you want some modifications, and we can discuss that. But let's assume that this is exactly what you want, because it will be true for some people. And so now you've put this data in. Now this particular workbook does not send the data back. If you wanted this in Sage with this example and you only had query, you would enter it the way you currently are entering it. But there are other templates on the Launchpad that are write or import enabled, and they will send the information back. And I'll be showing you some of those. So there's lots of options, different strokes for different folks. But another thing that I've seen operational people do, I've also seen it when people do financials. They'll create a financial and then distribute them, and they want it to be interactive. People have comments or they want to explore. And so content will be put into the workbook. Well, let's say I put in some explanation right here. If I now refresh the data, and let's say I added cost code 1020, 1040 would now be on row 14 if I refreshed. But what would happen with this data I entered? In normal Excel, you'd be kind of in trouble because it stays on the row you enter it. So it wouldn't be valid anymore. But Office Connector has special capabilities amongst all of its many capabilities to retain the data on the correct row. So all of that is part of it. So hopefully you get an idea. It's something that's ready to go. It might be useful as is, or something similar to this. I have other examples like this to show you. And I refreshed the data, and it's current. And I could add another column, to the workbook. I could say, now this one has grouping, so sometimes it's harder to do things. But let's say I wanted to insert a column right here for, change orders not in Sage, not yet. So that's going to be an entry field, and I just entered my values. Well, this is the value of my original approved, but I could add another column, which is this value plus this amount that's not in Sage. And you do that. Why would you do it? Because an operational person wants to do it, and you guys decide it's strategically important. Lots of people do. Of course, now in that work process, you have to think, like if I'm entering change orders for thinking, like what if, then when I actually enter them in Sage, I need to get these values out. So that's when I say the work process that you decide on, it should be reflected here. So as you enhance or create your own, we recommend, document your work process so people know what the plan is. Because what you can accomplish with this technology is, there's really actually no limit. So that is an explanation of one way to launch an Office Connector workbook. Well, this is the Launchpad. So when you install Office Connector, you're going to get this. You're going to get all these tabs. Well, just because you have the financial tab doesn't mean you can run these financials. You have to have the Office Connector products that power that, and we're covering them, and then your TAG representative can help you get what you need. But if you have it, then you just refresh the workbook, and assuming you have the rights to it and the right to use the respective Office Connector license, because you can control that, I can get an updated workbook. But before I show any more, I'm going to just build something from nothing. So let me just do that real quick. And that's really how all of this started. We didn't know that there would be any workbooks. We thought people would just build whatever it is they wanted. And we had no idea how extensively people would use it because, well, we didn't. And boy, do people use it extensively. So I might do something like this. I'll just start simple. I could say from, 1/1/2018, through 5/31/2018, I want something, okay? So let's say I wanted transactional data, okay? So could I do that? Sure. I would come here to add-ins, and I'm going to select this option. This is, under add-ins is Office Connector's functionality, And that's the query capability, this icon. So a query connects Excel to information somewhere, and it's dynamic. As that new data changes, then the data that's returned is automatically grows or shrinks depending on conditions and what have you. So I'm going to do a query, and it's asking me to select my Sage folder. That's exactly how you do it with inside of Sage, right? So I'm going to pick my Sage folder, and then I'm asked to log in. So now at this point, it's not going to let me pull data from tables that I don't have access to, right? That would be unsuccessful. And if you don't give them access to the designer, one of your users, then they can't do what I'm doing here. They would just be able to refresh things that are created for them. But now I'm presented with a list of all the tables that are inside of Sage. Address book, accounts payable, and I can pull from any number of the tables, and I can have data in the headers and footers and columns from any tables that I want. But in my example, I'll just say that I want job cost transactions. So I typed in JC space T, and I could preview that, and it says, okay, here's what you have for transactions. Is that the table? And you go, yep, probably you know that. And now I hit next, and now it's saying, here are the columns in Sage. Now we have helpful hints to teach you more about your database, where we're showing you like the key, what identifies unique rows in this table, they're identified. But you just pick the columns that you want. So I'm hitting the space bar to do that, or I can hit the mouse button to get what I want through here. And I can say debit and credit and vendor and commitment and whatever else it is that I want on my report. I select it, and now I'm going to hit next, and now I could limit it. So if I don't limit it, I'm going to get all the data, all the transactions from that table in Excel. And that could be quite a lot for some of you. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to say add a condition, and then I want the transaction date, because I want accounting and non-accounting related transactions. The transaction date is greater than or equal to, and it's not a static value. That's how most Excel technology works. You push it in and it's static. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the value type to a parameter. And I'm going to say the parameter is whatever date happens to be in B1. So use the date in B1, and the transaction date out in Sage has to be greater than or equal to that date, and the transaction date has to be less or equal to the date in B3. Actually, I made a mistake. Well, good. And I didn't do it on purpose, okay? But I'll tell you I did. Really, that should have been B2, right? And so I can just edit it. I just clicked on it. And I could add ands and ors. I could build very complex conditions pretty easily. And so there you go. I've done that. I hit next. And now I named this report. So this is where we begin to depart from Excel-based solutions, this solution specifically, from a report writer. Like reports on a menu, they do one thing. And if you want something else, that's another thing. And you got to run 5 reports and then look at them in order to try to figure out what it is that's going on out there on jobs or whatever. But you do not have to do that here. You can build whatever it is that you want, all that's interconnected from within Excel. And when you refresh, all the stuff you need is all right in one place. So in this case, though, I'm just going to say that the report is just a transaction report. So I'm going to hit finish, and now I have a result. I have a list of the transactions. Okay, what did I do here? 5-1, that should be correct. Let me just, I'm talking and being able to talk and do it at the same time, let's just see what I did here. So the transaction, picked out so I'm editing. What I did is I told it I wanted to edit what I just created with a query. These are mistakes that you might make, right? And in this case, I actually didn't. So the transaction date is greater than or equal to that, and the transaction date is less or equal to that. That is correct. I may have to broaden my date range. That is correct here, and then hit finish. So let me just, if you ever go in there and do that, then it'll ask you to remap your parameters. And I'll say, and that's what it's asking me to do right here. That way, if you moved your date ranges, you'd be able to accommodate the reports you've created if you move your parameters. So 12/31/2020, and I'll right click and hit refresh. What am I doing here? Okay, sorry. I went from one presentation on one technology to another. I'm just going to start and not talk as much and actually just do it. And the first thing I'm going to do, well, actually, this could work for you. If I ran into an issue like that, the first thing I'm going to do is check whether my connection is good, that I'm working, or if I have some kind of an issue. So I'm actually going to go off the new file because the current file could have a lot of information. And I'm just going to pick some columns, and then I'm not going to put any parameters in and hit finish. And that will show me that I actually do have data in this folder. So yep, there's data and querying works, right? So that tells me right there that what I did on this other sheet, I just did it wrong, right? So let's just try it again, what I was trying to do, talking and all that. So I'll say from 1/1/2018, and then I'll do a query off the job cost transaction table, and I'm just going to pick a variety of different columns here. And again, in this case, I'm going to add conditions, the transaction date. All the transactions in that file have transaction dates. So the transaction date is greater than or equal to, maybe that's what I did. I said less than or equal to. Greater than or equal to the value in B2. And the transaction date is less than or equal to the value in B3. Okay, and now I give it a name and I hit finish and I have a result. What is it that I'm doing here? Okay, let me look at my date. 20, okay, someone pulled a fast one. Someone updated my data set, and so there's quite a lot of stuff here. So let's see here, 1/1/2015 through 12/31/2020. Let's see here, refresh. Okay, I beg your pardon. I do these all the time, and so you can tell when I'm surprised, like, all right, what am I doing that's different? But people do mess with my presentation environment, and there will be consequences. But anyway, so you see I have a result here, and now I'm seeing the data. You're not going to have this issue because you're going to be working with your actual data, so you'll know when you build something what dates and parameters are going to work best for you. What I wanted to show is that when you build something like this, you can then, because you know Excel, build out the layout of the report. You don't have to learn other technology. If I want to build that, I can do it. I can insert a filter or subtotals or whatever it is I want. But another way I could work with that data is I could select that data and I could insert, in this case, actually insert a pivot table. And it's your choice how you use the data, but when I insert a pivot table, that data I just created and connected Excel to, it'll refresh. Anytime I hit refresh, it will refresh. So now I could say, when I want to look at this, I want that to be my base data, but for the project I'm currently working on, I want the debit account in the row, and I want, the job and the cost code in the column heading, right? And then I want the amount here. Well, that list, that's that query I just made. And then here's that presentation. That's just Excel doing that presentation. Well, now I could take this and I could say, oh, I want to know more about, this particular debit account, or I want to know more about this or whatever. So I can just click on something and it will show me the detail. But the source of all of that is that query I built from that connected me to Sage. So that's one way to use the technology, a very simple way. But let's use the same sort of thing, but in a much more advanced way. Okay, so let's say I had, I don't know everybody who's attending, so I'm going to do a reconciliation between job costs and GL real quick. It's a common thing, but it really is any kind of data you want to get, you and have it one way or another, you can create it using the exact same process that I'm doing here. So I'm going to say, use some broad date range through, 12/31, whatever, 2020. You wouldn't use such a broad date range. But in this case, the first thing I want to do is do a query off that same table, right? It's the same thing, but in this case, I don't want all the detail. I want that unique debit account, okay? Because I have data on all sorts of tables. So that query and pivot table will not produce the reconciliation I want. But what I'm doing, it'll totally do it, and it'll do it easily. So I'm saying I want the debit account in that table. There's lots of rows, and the only column I'm concerned about is the debit account, and I only want the rows where the counting date is in that date range. So counting date is greater than or equal to that date or whatever. Now, I'm not actually going to put that condition in here because I want to see every debit account, regardless of date. And then I want my amounts to be based on the date. So I'm going to say I only want to see rows out of job costs, right, that have a debit account value. Now, let's say you had a different strategy. I wanted to see information on employees and when they worked, or I want to see cost code vendor combination so I can figure out where vendors have worked and things like that. So you would be grabbing different columns depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. But it would work the same way as what I'm doing. So debit account has to be not equal to, and I'm going to say the literal value of blank. So debit account not equal blank, that's all my accounting transactions, right? And job cost. So that's the only condition I want. Well, I could have millions of rows that have debit accounts. And I don't want millions of rows on my report. So I'm going to tell it to exclude duplicate rows. And in this case, I'm going to say it is from the transaction table, but it's unique, debit account, right? That's the name of the report. This is what your peers do. They build different reports with names because they can have dashboards that have summary information and then hyperlinks to all the data, and executives love that sort of thing. So that's how you would do this kind of a thing. So now I have my list of debit accounts, and now let's say I want the name and the current balance right here, name and current balance. So that's not on the transaction table. It's on a completely different table. That's one of the challenges that people have typically when they use a report designer is, I have to identify all the tables that are involved, and I have to do it all at the same time, right? I can't evolve something. With this, you can evolve what you want. So I'm going to use this formula right here. It's a lookup formula, and I'm going to say lookup off the general ledger account table, because that's what's added. Your consultant would know all of this, and you can learn all of the data. But I'm going to say for this row, this column E7, the value of the account is in $D7. That's the account. The next row, it's D8, So I want the title and I want the current balance. That's what I want. So I just built that. So I built those two formulas. Those are your formulas. They're just like any other Excel formula. So here, once you learn it, then you start learning this software fast. You go, well, these are just Excel formulas, and so now how do I copy it down? I just double click, and that's just Excel, right? So now I've got that, and going forward, as I refresh, this account list will grow. As there's new accounts, I don't have to think about it. Well, now I want the amount from job cost amount here, right? So that, because this is the current balance, right? I want the job cost amount for that account and that date range. How do I do it? It's totally simple. See this sum function? It looks similar to the Excel sum function, and it will work similar, except you're pointing it out to Sage, because that's where your data is. Your data is in Sage. So I want to look at the job cost transaction table, and I want to pull the amount from there, and then I'm going to add my condition, right? I don't care about the job in this case. I care that the debit account is equal to the value in D7. See how visual it is? It's very visual. And if you get a chance to just practice something like this, it's like, wow, is it really that easy? And yeah, if you learn it in steps, it's this easy. So then I want the accounting date to be greater than or equal to the value here in B2. Now in this case, I'm going to use a fixed cell reference because it's a formula. And you either know that about Excel or you don't. I'm building a formula. If I copy it down and I just typed in B2, then it would change to B3, B4, B5. I don't want that. So I want the accounting date range to come from those cells up there. And why did I do it this way? Because I want to build something one time and then use it whenever I want it. That's smart, right? Work smart, don't work hard. And so now I have what I want. And so I hit finish. Here I have a formula. There's the syntax. If that scares you, ignore it. There's your result, but you can learn that. It's not that difficult. Here's the source of the data, and here's what I want, and those are the conditions. So now I copy it down, right? So there's my job cost, and if I change my date ranges, the amounts will change. Well, now I want data from a completely another table, right? I want from a general ledger, I want data, okay? And so right here, I'm gonna hit the sum function, and I'm saying, okay, now I want another table. You can keep doing this with as many tables as you want, but in this case, it's GL transaction table. And this thing, there's a reason I'm showing you this. When we show you financials, one of the biggest things that people have is like, I have a financial, but I wanna look at the subledgers because things are out of whack or whatever, and people don't have a plan to do that. I'm showing you what your peers are doing. If they have a financial, they can get to any data anywhere in Sage exactly the way I'm showing you right here. So in the current table, I want to grab the debit and credit amount. Those are going to be my columns, right? And now I have to tell it, like there's a lot of transactions. For this row, I only want to look at the account that's in right here in D7. So this is why people, if you go to conferences, they'll say, oh, it's so easy and I learned it with hardly any training, is because it can be very intuitive as you're playing with it. But you know, different people learn at different rates. So anyway, accounting date is greater than or equal to $B, $2, and add another condition, accounting date less than or equal to $B, $3, and now I hit finish, and I have that, right? And so now this is going to be my debit and credit, right? And so there shouldn't be anything in that credit, but if there was, you know, now I might say, I want to say equals, you know, like this plus this to, so because that would be a negative number. So that's what I'm going to balance to, right? Something like this. Did I do minus? No, whatever. I'm trying to rush because I have a lot of things. I think you guys are getting it. Anyway, now I could have another formula that takes this, you know, minus this or plus this because it's a credit balance. You could do that and then put a condition that says, draw my attention to it because there's a problem. And that's how people have built dashboards and whatever else. So those are some quick down and dirty kind of a way of using the data, the solution. But there's all these things here that are ready to go. You get these with an investment just even in the standard license. So there's forecast reports and work in progress reports and all sorts of things. And if you want to see more, we have a recorded presentation just on project cost forecasting and work in progress. And now you'll understand kind of how those work and what they're based on. So there's a lot of ways, things I could show you, but I want to move along because I want to talk about financials for a moment and why there's a separate product. So now I'm going to go over to this other tab, and to use these reports, I'd have to have a query standard or designer, and I'd have to have the financials. It's a site license. And I could then generate any of these reports for my data. So right here, this is a financial statement with drill down. Any of the reports that I've shown you can be drill down enabled, meaning if you want to show on the report what makes up that number, you could do that. It's part of Office Connector to be able to do that. And we teach it in training classes. But in this case, it's going to work very similar to the financial statements in Sage, but the financial statements have limitations, right? There's only certain things that it can do, and that's like 2 years of information. and it can't run on future periods, and there's other limitations. But office connector financials is not limited in any of those ways. So if I pick what I want to run it on, here's a prefix group, right? And you can set up your prefix groups here, and they're just the same as they would be in financials. And if you have more prefixes in your GL, it can be accommodated. So when I hit refresh, I'm going to get a trial balance, a balance sheet, and profit and loss based on this recipe. It'll work. It's, you know, right off the bat, that would be your data. Now you may want to augment it or have graphs or charts or whatever, but this is available right out of the box with it. But let's say you found a number somewhere in here and you go, well, that doesn't look right. You'd have to go run another report. Well, we know that. So here's a report for transactions. And so if I want to know what makes up a number, I can double click it, and that is drill down enabled. It basically passed parameters to this other report and refreshed it. So if you're familiar with Crystal, that's like a Crystal sub-report. So that's an example of the financials working. And there are other examples for you to look at that are on here on the launchpad. But I want to show you why, you know, how it works, how simple it is, and even why there would be a financial product. So if I come into Excel, blank workbook, I want to sit here and think for a moment, where do financials come from in Sage? And they come from the general ledger account table. So let's just have a look at that table. I'm going to use the query, which I've already shown you, and I'm going to pick my folder, and I'm going to look at the GL account table. So I'll say GL account, and I hit next, and now I see my account and the title. These would be in the same order that you would see them if you went into setup GL. So all of these values are here, and they're all utilized by the financials to give you financials for like last year or whatever. And there's future periods and current activity, and there's 2 years of activity, right? Out there on this table. Well, if I hit finish, I'm looking at all that data, and it's for my current period. So if your current period right now is July, well then these would be July. But let's say it's June and you haven't closed June yet. Your current balance is then going to reflect June. If you wanted July, you'd have to take current balance and you'd have to add future one. And that would be your balance for July because you haven't closed June yet. But let's say you wanted to run a financial for May, which, you know, before June. Then you'd take current balance and you'd subtract current activity. That's how you would do it if you were going to build it, right, with these values here. So when I say a financials is derivative, that's what the financial reporter in Sage does, but it'll only do it for 2 years. And Sage can accumulate 10 years if you've been using Sage. Well, that's not here. It's not on this table. It's on a different table. So the financials, the legacy financials does not report on it, but this does. So if I, on this workbook right here, this financial, if I right here said I want to run it for 5 years ago, I put that in there and I hit refresh and it will run, it will calculate, it will derive it. You don't have to restore from backup or do anything like that. So I'm going to show you how simple it is because it's pretty simple. How does the financial statement work real quick? And I recognize I'm covering content at a certain rate, and I may not cover everything that we might want to cover, but I want to cover it thoroughly so you get a good understanding because we have presentations, short ones, on each of these topics. So it's better to give you a good, strong foundation. Bear with me. I did a presentation before this, and then I quickly closed, and it ended like a few minutes before I had to join here. So I beg your pardon. Normally I'm more prepared. And now you're going to see how cluttered my desktop is with all my desktop icons here. So let's see here. Show desktop icons. Right here is an empty financial statement, skeleton, if you will. And I'm going to use this data folder right here for my example. So in this data folder, the general ledger structure is kind of interesting. It's got 2 prefix levels, and the fiscal controls are different for each of the prefix One is November and one is December. That may be more extensive than what you have, but other people have more than that. So to do a report, I've got a list of my accounts here, and I want to, for whatever prefix, I want to run it for this period, the year and period, and then I want to just be able to change that. So how would I go about doing that is under here, under add-ins, if I click this, the function right here, it will show me the financial function, the TSGL amount function. That, all of these functions are what you get when you invest in Office Connector Financials, and this is the heart of it. So you see here in the parameters that the function, it's just an Excel function, can take one prefix or a range of cells or whatever, and then it will report on that. The function will give you a value. You can tell what base account or a range of base accounts and the year and period, even if it's several years ago, just put them in there. And then you can tell it what amount you want it to derive, the balances of that period, the activity for that period, or year to date through that period. Those are all part of this. And then there's more, but I just want to quickly demonstrate how easy it is. So here I'm going to say, there's my period. And here I'm going to say the base account, right? It's B9, $sign B9. And then the year, period. And then the amount type, this is activity. So I want period activity. That's what that syntax said. Put in period activity right there. So I hit that, and I'm going to copy it down. I have to tell it to refresh, and I've got data, right, as of that period. Now, if I change this to period 4, the formula should then go out to Sage and derive what it is as of period 4. So let's try that. If I just do that, yep, it did it. It's interactive. Well, I go, well, that's good. That's activity. I'm just going to copy the formula over and change one thing. I'm going to tell it, I want in this column, I want balance. All I have to do to get it is type in balance, and boom, I got it. So now that's a lot. What it's doing is, it may be simple, but what it's doing is pretty amazing. But there's ways to deploy that. I told you that there were these amount types right here, right? That was in the syntax. So I typed them right there. And so what I wanted to show you is that you could just come right here, and I built my formula, but they reference drop-down boxes. This is just Excel. It's a list. I pointed at the amount types. But right now, that's activity, year-to-date activity through this period. But what if I say, no, I want that to be period activity? I just change it, right? So all that's doing is it's putting into that formula that value. That's how it worked. So you could do this with any of the reports. This concept you could use for agings, AR agings, you dream it up, you could do it. But for this financial, I could also have side by side. I could have one range of prefixes and one period or another in whatever column I want, and even from different data folders. And then here I'm using math to add that together to get me what it quarters. So that's behind the financials aspect. Now I think that we're running along, and so that's on me, and I beg everyone's pardon. But I wanted to give you a good, strong foundation of what I could show you thoroughly, and then we could build on it. So we went into a lot of detail.
You're doing great on time, James.
Am I?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
Where am I at on the time mark? I'm looking at.
Yeah, we've got about 7 minutes. I sent out a message and I let everyone know if they had any closing questions to send them in. I haven't received any other questions, but yeah, continue, please.
That's because I haven't taken a breath and given anybody a chance to ask any. But what I didn't go into detail is the writing and importing, and I want to show one example because it could do both. But writing is really an efficient way to update information other than the user interfaces in Sage. If those work for you and that's what you want, great, use them. But I would invest a little time to understand maybe a more efficient way, like updating things in a grid, all your vendors and just the information you want, or employees or jobs. It's very fast. and you're using the power of Excel, and then with a click of a button, boom, it's putting them into Sage as if you manually typed them, and you could save an enormous amount of time. But I want to show one example to build on something that I showed earlier, and that is it's going to be on the launchpad, and I'm going to use this cost code level 1, but the category level 1 would work too. So this is the pinnacle of project cost forecasting. We've been doing this sort of thing since the mid-90s, and this is the very pinnacle of everything that we've done. So the objective here is to get data on your active projects in a way that you can get that information from the field. Enroll the operational people as part of the team. They are, you know. And so what I want to accomplish here is I want to select a job and have a forecast workbook. And there's some setup options, like you can pull it off of the master file or have it as of a cutoff date. And your consultant can help navigate how you would answer that. But you can also send the data back. And so I could say that I want to import the transactions back so I have them in miscellaneous worksheet transactions. Now, if you know a lot about Sage, you're going to say, well, hold it, you can't import those. With this technology, you can, not otherwise. So, and then I could say, where should that go inside of Sage? And I'll say, well, cost to complete should go here, and cost at completion should go here. And those are miscellaneous worksheet areas inside of Sage. There's my variance. But you do that one time. The working part of this, when you first got it, would be for you to select a job. So I'm going to select my project, and I'm going to hit refresh. And I'm going to get a result. And then what I would typically do is I would save that. Well, how I've seen people use it is they have a forecast folder, and below it may be a folder for each project manager, and then they generate workbooks for all their active jobs. Bam, 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 separate workbooks. Now they give this to the person. Well, you may say, well, we don't do cost to complete. We do cost % complete or at completion, or we put in labor and material and sub. There's another one that does that. I just picked the cost code level 1. But usually we found that people have a forecast method, and they got all this information. But in reality, you may self-perform some things and sub out other things. So you might say on this row, yeah, I want this to be, you know, $45,000 to complete, and here's an overage, and now I'm going to explain why I still have time to do something about it, you know. But over here, on this row right here, you could say, I don't want to forecast that by cost to complete. We sub this out, and I want that to be % complete. You can change it row by row. We've never had this before recently. So you've got that, and you've got the ability for the project manager or whomever to put their reasoning. Well, and then that data can be sent to Sage. But the real power is what I'm about to show you. So this is July. Now pretend it's August. July's over. Well, when I do this, I hit refresh. Now it's not August, but it would say August 20th or whatever, whenever you're doing it. So now I'm doing my forecast for August. Well, look, I still have July. And so you have all your history in the workbook. And operational people who are over project managers, they love that because now there's accountability. And you could graph and chart, and you can really manage. And this information then can be put into Sage that will back up your WIP reports and your cash flow. And this is a hot topic. We see a ton of interest in this. As a consultant, I'll just tell all of you that you should have always been doing this. But right now, bonding and surety companies, they love this. And so anyway, so that just showcases that I could write or import, meaning I can get it back into Sage. So now I did kind of cover that. There are professional services opportunities. I would say start with your TAG representative about what it is you want to accomplish, and then guide through the process of figuring out whether you're going to do it or we're going to help you or whatever. There are training classes. Here's the list. I mean, you can learn. They're 90 minutes, and you'll learn the product if you take them and apply yourself. There's no doubt about it. You could do quite a lot. And here's the contact information. And there you go. I got in with a minute to spare.
Awesome. No, right on time. That is perfect, James.
Thank you.
I applaud you.
Thank
so
you.
We thank you for tuning in. Again, he covered so much information. There's a lot of other resources, videos that we could dive into if there's a particular function that you want to look into. And of course, we're happy to facilitate additional meetings to review more. Again, we have more webinars scheduled for August as well, so stay tuned for that. Didn't see any additional questions, but of course, you can always send us an email and we can address it that way, or of course, set up another meeting that we could dive into. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, James, for another great presentation. And I will be sending out slide deck and recording for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.